It was one of those quiet mornings when everything felt still, the sun slowly rising over the lake behind my home. The water shimmered like glass, reflecting the pale gold of dawn, and the only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. I had lived here for years, far enough from the main road to feel secluded, but close enough to civilization that I still received mail and the occasional knock at the door. That morning, I decided to take my coffee out to the dock. It was my ritual, a moment of calm before the day began, watching sunlight scatter across the water that I had grown to cherish as my own small piece of peace. I was halfway through my cup when I saw her for the first time that day, Karen. Everyone in the area knew her name, though few said it kindly. She had recently taken charge of the Homeowners Association for a nearby cluster of houses that bordered the lake. The HOA had been dormant for years, almost forgotten, until Karen revived it like some self-declared queen returning to reclaim her throne. She was the type who carried a clipboard everywhere, always wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, as if she were inspecting her kingdom. She marched toward me with the determined gait of someone ready for confrontation. I sighed quietly, setting my cup down on the wooden railing of the dock. I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "Good morning," I offered, though my tone was more polite than warm. She didn't return the greeting. Instead, she held up a stack of papers, her eyes narrowing with authority. "I'm here to talk about your lake usage," she said, as if she were speaking to a trespasser. "Starting this month, all residents who use the lake are required to join the Lakeview HOA and pay the monthly dues. That includes you." I couldn't help but smile slightly, not from amusement but disbelief. "My lake usage," I repeated. "You're telling me I have to pay to use my own lake?" She looked offended that I questioned her. "This lake belongs to the HOA," she declared. "All residents in this area are subject to the rules and fees. It's part of maintaining the community standards. You can't just use it without contributing." I leaned against the wooden post, folding my arms. "Karen," I said slowly, "I'm not part of your HOA. I never signed anything, and I certainly don't pay fees for something that I own." She gave a tight smile, the kind that usually precedes a thinly veiled threat. "Oh, everyone who uses the lake must be part of the HOA. It's community property now. I've already filed the paperwork." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "That's interesting," I said. "Because according to the county land records, this lake isn't community property. It's private. It's part of my land deed, every inch of it." Her expression flickered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "That's impossible. The lake's been shared by residents for years. Just because your house is close doesn't mean you own it." I didn't bother arguing further right then. People like her didn't believe words, they believed paperwork and embarrassment. "You're welcome to check the property records," I said, keeping my tone even. "But I'm not signing anything, and I'm certainly not paying for what's already mine." I turned back toward the water, signaling that the conversation was over. Karen didn't take it well. She huffed, adjusted her sunglasses, and stomped away, muttering something about non-compliant residents and violations. I watched her go, shaking my head. I dealt with her type before, people who crave authority but have no idea how fragile it is when it's built on nothing. I didn't think much more about it that day, choosing instead to enjoy the peace she momentarily disrupted. But the next few days brought a change in the air. It started with little things: letters in my mailbox from the Lakeview HOA, filled with rules and regulations I had never agreed to. They included notices about unauthorized use of community resources, failure to comply with association membership, and even possible penalties. Each letter was signed by Karen, acting HOA president. I ignored them at first, assuming she'd lose interest when she realized she had no legal grounds. Then came the neighbors. A few of them stopped me while I was mowing the lawn or washing my truck, asking if I'd heard about the new HOA policies. Apparently, Karen had been telling everyone she was modernizing the community and that membership would be mandatory. Some people believed her, others didn't care enough to fight it, and a few quietly admitted they thought she was overstepping. But the rumors were spreading fast. I knew it was only a matter of time before her obsession turned personal. Sure enough, that evening she showed up again. I was out by the dock, replacing a few old boards when I heard her heels clacking down the path. "We need to talk," she announced. I set down my hammer and looked up at her. "Karen," I said calmly, "you need to stop harassing me about your HOA. I've told you I'm not part of it." She crossed her arms. "Then you'll be fined for unauthorized lake access," she said firmly. "You're setting a bad example for other residents." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Unauthorized lake access," I repeated. "Karen, I don't think you understand. I own this lake. It's not yours to regulate, it's not the HOA's, and it's not community property. It's in my name. The boundary lines go all the way around the shoreline. If you'd like, I can print the deed and show you." Her face flushed, a mix of anger and disbelief. "That can't be true," she snapped. "You're just saying that to get out of paying. Everyone knows the lake belongs to the neighborhood." At that point, I realized logic wasn't going to work. I turned back to my repairs and said, "Believe what you want, but if you keep trespassing on my property or sending those letters, we're going to have a real problem." I didn't raise my voice or threaten her. I didn't need to. The quiet confidence in my tone seemed to unsettle her more than any anger could. She muttered something about calling the county office and stormed off again. I watched her leave, wondering how far she was willing to take this fantasy. The truth was, she had no power here. The lake wasn't public, the HOA had no jurisdiction, and her paperwork meant nothing outside the small group of homeowners gullible enough to follow her lead. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in hues of orange and pink, I stood at the edge of the dock and let the calm return. The water rippled gently against the wood, the world quiet once again. I knew Karen wouldn't stop, not yet. People like her rarely admit defeat easily. But the difference between us was simple: she was pretending to have power, and I didn't need to. I already owned it, every inch of the land beneath my feet and every reflection on the surface of my lake. A few days passed after my last encounter with Karen, and I hoped she had finally come to her senses. The mornings returned to their usual calm, the lake perfectly still, reflecting the bright blue sky like a mirror. It was early afternoon when I decided to spend a quiet day fishing, something I hadn't done in weeks. I packed a small cooler, grabbed my fishing rod, and walked down to the dock, grateful to escape any lingering tension. The sun was warm, the breeze light, and everything felt normal again until I saw a police car pull into my driveway. For a brief second, I thought it might be a coincidence, maybe an officer lost or patrolling the area, but as soon as I saw Karen standing beside the car, waving dramatically, I knew this was no accident. She was gesturing wildly toward me, her sunglasses pushed up on her head, her face red with indignation. I could barely hear her from across the yard, but her voice carried that shrill tone that could pierce through glass. "That's him. He's trespassing on HOA property," she shouted. The officer beside her, looking a bit confused, began walking toward me. I stayed where I was, calm and collected, my fishing rod still in hand. I'd dealt with confrontation before, both in life and in my professional background. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to challenge me, and I wasn't about to lose my composure over a self-proclaimed HOA dictator. As the officer approached, I greeted him politely. "Afternoon, officer. How can I help you today?" I asked, setting my fishing pole down carefully. He adjusted his hat and gave me a cautious look before speaking. "Sir, we received a report that you're trespassing on private property belonging to the Lakeview Homeowners Association. Is that correct?" Behind him, Karen was nodding eagerly like she'd already won. I resisted the urge to laugh. "No, officer," I said calmly, "that information is completely false. This lake and the surrounding land are part of my private property. I own it outright. If you'd like, I can show you the deed and survey records." The officer blinked, clearly thrown off by my response. "You own the lake?" he asked. Karen immediately jumped in before I could answer. "He's lying. He's just saying that to avoid paying HOA fees. Everyone here is part of the association. He's not special." She barked, her tone dripping with entitlement. The officer turned to her, raising a hand slightly as if to quiet her down. "Ma'am, let me handle this," he said firmly. She crossed her arms but stayed put, muttering under her breath. I took out my phone and scrolled through my Documents app, where I had digital copies of my property deed and the county survey map. "Here you go," I said, showing the officer the official files. He leaned closer, reading carefully, then looked back toward the lake and around the property. "This shows that the lake, the dock, and the land surrounding it are part of your private parcel," he said slowly, confirming what I already knew. "Exactly," I replied. Karen seems to have misunderstood the boundary lines. Her HOA doesn't extend onto my land. This lake has never been community property. I've owned it since I bought the estate 6 years ago." Karen's face flushed bright red. "That's ridiculous. That can't be right. Everyone knows this lake belongs to the HOA. We've had meetings about it," she insisted, her voice getting louder by the second. The officer turned to her, his patience wearing thin. "Ma'am, according to these records, this property including the lake is privately owned. It's not part of your association's jurisdiction." She gaped at him like he had just spoken another language. But he's using it like it's public. He can't just fish there whenever he wants." The officer gave her a long, level stare. "Ma'am, he can do whatever he wants on his own property. You can't call the police on someone for being on land they legally own." Her jaw dropped, but no words came out. For the first time since this ordeal began, she seemed speechless. I almost felt a twinge of sympathy, but that quickly faded when I remembered she'd actually called law enforcement on me for simply being outside on my own property. The officer handed my phone back, nodding respectfully. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. It looks like a misunderstanding." I smiled politely. "No problem, officer. I appreciate you coming out. I know you're just doing your job." He tipped his hat slightly before turning back to Karen. "Ma'am, I suggest you refrain from making false reports in the future. Calling the police over a civil matter like this wastes valuable resources. If there's any dispute about property lines, it should be handled through county records, not law enforcement." Karen's face contorted in outrage. "False report? Are you accusing me of lying?" she snapped. "Ma'am," the officer replied calmly, "the facts are clear. You claimed this man was trespassing, but according to legal documents, he was on his own property. That means your report was inaccurate. She sputtered, unable to form a coherent response. Finally, she turned sharply and stormed back toward her house, muttering something about talking to her lawyer. The officer watched her go, then gave me a small, knowing look. Something tells me this isn't the last time you'll have to deal with her. I chuckled quietly. Probably not, I said. But at least now we've established the facts. He nodded, gave a brief wave, and returned to his car. When he drove off, the silence that followed was almost therapeutic. The water lapped softly against the dock, and a few ducks floated lazily by as if mocking the chaos that had just unfolded. I picked up my fishing rod again, smiling to myself. The best kind of victory is the quiet one, where the truth speaks louder than any argument could. Later that evening, I received a knock at my door. It was one of my neighbors, an older man named Paul who lived a few houses down. "Heard what happened today," he said with a grin. "Karen's been telling everyone you're going to get arrested for using her lake. Guess she didn't realize who really owns it?" I laughed. "She found out the hard way," I replied. Paul shook his head. "She's been trying to control everyone around here. Good to see someone finally put her in her place." As the night settled in, I sat out on the back porch, watching the moonlight shimmer across the surface of the lake. The reflection danced softly, calm and undisturbed. For years, I had worked hard to maintain this property, to protect it and preserve its natural beauty. To have someone try to claim it out of arrogance and greed had been both insulting and absurd. But seeing her face when the officer confirmed the truth, that was something I'd never forget. I knew Karen wouldn't let this go easily. People like her rarely did. She thrived on control and attention, and I had just stripped her of both in front of an audience that mattered. But I also knew I was prepared for whatever came next. I had the law, the paperwork, and the patience on my side. The lake was mine legally, rightfully, and undeniably. No HOA, no self-proclaimed president, and no false police report could change that. The quiet ripples across the water that night felt like a promise that peace, no matter how often it was disturbed, would always return to those who stood firm in truth. After the police incident, word spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. By the next morning, almost everyone in the community had heard how Karen called the cops on me for trespassing on my own lake and how it completely backfired. Some neighbors waved and smirked as they drove by, others avoided eye contact, unsure whether to laugh or stay neutral. I didn't really care either way. What mattered most was that the truth was finally out. The lake was mine, legally and undeniably, and Karen had just embarrassed herself publicly by pretending otherwise. But of course, someone like her never admits defeat. She doubled down instead. The next few days were strangely quiet. I didn't see Karen out patrolling the sidewalks, clipboard in hand like usual. It almost felt peaceful, but I knew it wouldn't last. I spent my time fixing up the dock, clearing fallen branches, and getting ready to host a small neighborhood barbecue for some close friends that weekend. I wanted to reclaim the serenity that Karen's antics had disturbed. On Friday morning, however, I received a thick envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a typed letter on HOA letterhead, filled with legal jargon and threats about violations of community lake usage and unauthorized gatherings. I couldn't help but laugh as I read it. The letter demanded that I cease use of the community lake immediately or face fines and potential legal action. The problem, of course, was that the HOA had absolutely no jurisdiction over my land. Their authority ended at the edge of my property line, something the county survey map clearly showed. But it was obvious Karen was behind it, probably desperate to save face after the police encounter. I decided I'd had enough of her harassment. This time, I wasn't just going to ignore her. I gathered my paperwork, the deed, the survey map, and copies of her previous letters, and prepared to take it directly to the HOA board. The next day, I walked into the monthly HOA meeting at the community clubhouse. The room was half full, with neighbors seated around a long table. Karen sat near the front, looking startled as I entered. The president of the board, a man named Harold, raised his eyebrows when he saw me. "You're not a member, are you?" he asked politely. "No," I said. "But apparently, your board has been sending me threats about property I own. I think it's time we cleared that up." The room went silent. I placed my documents on the table and slid them toward Harold. He glanced at them, frowning, then passed them to the other board members. "These are official county records," I said. "They show that the lake and the land surrounding it are part of my private property. It has never been owned or managed by this HOA. So unless you've recently annexed property illegally, I'd appreciate it if the harassment stopped immediately." Karen jumped up, her voice trembling with frustration. "He's lying. Those can't be real. We've had meetings about lake rules for years," she shouted. Harold sighed heavily. "Karen, please sit down," he said. "We'll verify the records." One of the board members, a retired lawyer, adjusted his glasses and examined the documents closely. "He's right," the man said finally. "The HOA boundary ends at the edge of his driveway. The lake isn't, and never has been, under our management. Whoever sent these letters was in serious error." Karen's face turned pale. "But we've always treated it as part of the community," she argued weakly. "Tradition doesn't equal ownership," I said calmly. "You can't make up rules for property you don't own. And calling the police on me for using my own land, that crossed a line." Harold looked visibly annoyed now, not at me, but at Karen. "Karen, did you send that letter?" he asked. She hesitated, then stammered, "I was just enforcing what I thought were the rules." The room erupted in murmurs. Some people were shaking their heads. Others were clearly amused. Harold rubbed his temples and sighed. "This is unacceptable. You don't have the authority to send legal threats without board approval. This could have caused serious trouble." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but Harold cut her off. "Enough. You've embarrassed this board and wasted everyone's time." He turned back to me, his tone apologetic. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. You have our assurance that there will be no further issues from the HOA regarding your lake." "I appreciate that," I said, gathering my documents. "And just to be clear, I have no problem with the HOA. I just expect to be left alone." Harold nodded. "Understood." As I turned to leave, Karen muttered something under her breath about rich people thinking they're above the rules. I paused for a moment and looked back at her. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice even, "rules only work when they're real. Making them up doesn't make you powerful, it just makes you wrong." She glared at me, but didn't say another word. I walked out of the clubhouse to a few quiet chuckles behind me. It was over, at least for now. The next week, I hosted my lake barbecue as planned. A few neighbors showed up, bringing food and drinks, eager to finally relax without Karen hovering over everyone. We laughed about the ridiculousness of the whole situation and watched the sun set over the water. It felt good to share the peace again, knowing that I'd earned it through patience and persistence. Later that evening, as everyone was leaving, Harold stopped by. "Just wanted to thank you," he said. "We had an emergency meeting after you left. Karen's been removed from the board. Turns out she's been sending letters like that to several other residents, too." I wasn't surprised. "Hopefully this means things can go back to normal," I said. He smiled. "That's the plan." After he left, I sat alone by the dock, the lake shimmering under the moonlight. The quiet was perfect, no shouting, no phone calls, no arguments. Just the soft sounds of crickets and the gentle movement of water. It struck me how easily people like Karen could turn something peaceful into chaos, all because they craved control they never had. But in the end, truth and patience always win. A week later, I got a handwritten note in my mailbox. It was from Karen. The message was short and shaky. "I went too far. I shouldn't have called the police or sent that letter. I'm sorry." For a moment, I almost didn't believe it was from her. But I folded the note and set it aside. I didn't need her apology. The silence, the calm reflection on the lake, and the knowledge that I'd stood my ground, that was enough. The HOA had learned their lesson, and Karen, for all her arrogance, had finally been humbled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I leaned back in my chair, watching the fading light glimmer across the water I proudly called mine. The lake was peaceful again, and for the first time in weeks, so was I.